All right, ladies and gentlemen. That was quite nice, the music playing in the background there. Look, there's lots of things there. So what you need to do, please, is put your name at the top of the page so I know whose work it is, so I can give it excellent grades. Now remember you did this the other week. You did a 8 version of it, 8 sides. You did have your revision. We'll get this back as well. Let's feedback from the but bonus, I do get to see some parents tonight. I get to say how fantastic you are. Now, I seem to continue to write. Now, I was very purposeful with the length of time I gave you. I gave you 8 minutes. I gave you 8 minutes for a reason. You may have worked out that the mathematicians amongst you may have worked out that it's almost 1.5 minutes per mark. Yeah? A little bit more than that. So why I'm going to start doing that is because that's what you're going to get. Okay? So when it is 2-mark questions, yeah, you're going to get about 3 minutes time to answer them in the actual real thing. So the more you practice under what's called timed conditions, the better. So you get used to it. And that's fantastic. And yeah, there might be some who in the future we need to look at time, and there are some learners who might get extra time and all of those other sorts of things, and that we can deal with, but that's something that doesn't happen necessarily immediately and needs people to sort out. All right, now we're going to jump from...
No problem. I won't.
Okay. Sometimes when I speak slightly louder, Siri takes that as an instruction and starts deciding to send messages to different people. A bit awkward. I might suggest. All right, now back into the land of the market model. So we're going to need to be making more notes. We're going to need to be thinking quite clearly about how the market model is going to be working. Oh, look, there's spookily large numbers of me. Look at that. I could do my own TikTok just like that. Look at that. Yeah. All right. So, and then I come here. Okay. Now, what day was yesterday? 6th. That's where you last. So we resume. All right, so codes that you need for our Nearpod today, right there, YQ3GZ, YQ3GZ. Why should you be queuing for 3 gigahertz? I don't know. Yeah, I did think that was funny, but that's okay. Yeah, well, right. Now, so we're going to jump back in. If we do lose our place, we do have the code up in the top left-hand corner. Use. All right, now, we were talking about supply. We were talking about that it had a law of supply. And then the next part of that was what happens if it shifts, like with the demand curve, shifting. So in this particular instance, we talked about these determinants of supply. We talked about technological progress, so the idea that technology gives us a greater reduction or a reduction in our costs of production, which leads to greater supplies that we're able to produce. Similarly, if the price of multiple products that we produce by the firm, so if the price of one increases, sends us a signal that that one we're able to earn more revenue from, then we increase the production of that particular product, moving resources away. The other, if we consider the idea of time, where we discussed how the longer we allow producers, or the more time we allow the producers to produce, the more they're going to be able to produce for us. That's going to be a concept that we're going to come back to again in the future. All right, so keep that one sort of at the back of your mind as a future determinant that we're going to need to come back to. So let's jump into the tough one. Prices of other products produced by the same firm. If the price of an alternative product produced by the same firm increases, this might lead them to do what because of what particular reason? Where you go? It's too big a temptation for me. I just keep wanting to know what's going on in this class. I find it very difficult, to be honest. Helicopter parents and all of those things. Brandon, you got an idea? You with the multiple personalities? Good, well done, Emma. Exactly right. Good work, huh? Like that. It's a really good answer. Great. Now, language-wise, we had our supply curve. And we need to, just as we did with the demand curve, we need to talk about, well, we need to use the appropriate language. Okay? So with the demand curve, we talked about expansions and contractions. So with the supply curve, we're also going to talk about expansions and contractions. So if we are moving along the supply curve, going up it, up the supply curve, then we're going to refer to that as an expansion of supply, because there's an increase in the quantities. And as I said to you the other day, the more you're able to use the language, the specific words, the higher up the chain you go with regards to the examiner going, yes, they really know their stuff. Yeah? Because that sort of an understanding isn't what everybody has, but it can be what you have. So an expansion of supply, or an increase in the quantity supplied, is that movement up the supply curve, just as it was when we looked at demand. If we were to reverse it and go back down the supply curve, that would be just as it was with demand. The word we would use would be a contraction. He says, yes. All right. Contraction of supply, reducing the quantities supplied. Both of those two movements along the curve are caused only by price, which we're familiar with because it was the determinants that were changing, that were causing the supply curve to shift. So therefore, those were our two shifts. A movement to a shift to the left and a shift to the right. Shift to the left, shift to the right. Yeah. That's it. Those are the two movements. You'll notice that the phrase here is inward and outwards. That's fine. Yeah, you can use that. Rightwards and leftwards, fine. Try to avoid up and down, wherever possible. Try to avoid up and down. So those are the movements, and those are caused by the determinants, as we saw. The determinants changing cause those supply curves to move. All right, now are we ready for the next bit? Sure? Brace yourselves. Ready? All right, Kane is excited. What do we see? Determinants of supply. What are those? What's happening? What do you see in those? What determinants of supply do you see? What determinants of supply do you see? Let's start with, let's go for this one. What do we see? What are they talking about? Yeah. Absolutely. They're using 3D printing to print parts of aeroplanes. Bit scary when you think about it. Yeah. Well, that's what they're doing. yes, they 3D print houses and they 3D print cars and the other sorts of things as well. Yeah. Now this one, what's happened here? I know it's an older model phone to start with now, but what are they talking about? Yeah, because they've got multiple older lines or older phones. The new phone has come out. It's charging, you're able to charge more for the newer phone. Yeah. So therefore, rather than use the older models and put your scarce resources into those models, you're going to take those resources and put them in the newer model because you're going to earn greater profits from it. What about that one? What's happening there? Yeah. Goodness, it's a noisy day today. Yes. Subsidies. All right. The government paying you money as a business to help you produce your product, thereby reducing the cost of production. This particular article talks about a Chinese robotics industry that has been using a lot of subsidies from the government over the past few years. It's an older article. China has set a goal of producing 100,000 locally made industrial robots every year by the year 2020. And if you haven't seen the videos, I showed you the videos of them in school using the headbands to measure their brainwaves. No? Okay, I will show you that, right? They're using artificial intelligence and all sorts of other robotic techniques in the schools now, all right, in order to help them. So that's a technological thing, but they're using the big government subsidies in order to lower their costs. This one might be a bit difficult to figure out. But have you ever said to yourself, yeah, you know what I'd like to do? I'd like to build myself a car. Today? I know I did when I was younger. I wanted to build a car. Anybody else? I don't know why I naturally looked at the boys. That was very genderist of me. I apologize. I'm sure there are plenty of girls who want to build cars. Yes. Okay. But yeah, what's the problem with building a car? Is it something you can just, if it's you, can you just instantly, there's a car? Takes time. Yeah. Now this one is a real life situation of exactly that. The boy went home, he talked to his dad, and he said, you know, I'd like to build a car. And his dad said to him, all right. And they made it a bit of a father-son project. It took them years to build. But they built an entire car between the two of them. Yeah, they didn't put the fancy engine and all of those sorts of things in it, but the actual structure, etc., they did all the research. The dad was an engineering professor, so that might have helped. Okay. But the point being is that it took them the time to do it. This one here, what's happening there? Bit hard to see in the picture. Weather, well done. Yes. There's been a big storm and it's wiped out the crops. So that's going to have an effect on the supply of that particular product. Are there lots of different ways you can remember the determinants of supply? Yes, there are. Just like in science, you might have remembered Mrs. Green. Every good boy deserves fruit. Music, we've done those before. Yeah. All right. Have I shown you this one before? No. All right. So weather, technology, taxes, subsidies, costs. So a way to remember what the determinants are by using just those first letters. And then it might help you with the remembering of what those determinants are. Yes, you could add time in there too. Where you put it necessarily, you might need to rearrange the letters, create a different word for yourself. It's quite a fun game. There's actually a website that you can go to. I'm trying to remember what it's called. And you can input into the website the terms that you need to remember, and then it will create an acrostic poem out of the first letters of them, like this, mnemonic, whatever this is called. Yeah? I don't know what it's called, mnemonic learning or something. It'll have the word mnemonic in it somewhere, I'm sure. And it's quite cool because it'll create that for you. Right. Now this is an illustration for you, and it is going to look remarkably familiar. Right? Because this is about supply. Using the supply curve for, in this case, educational software, educational computer games, because there are some. Government provides a subsidy for the educational computer game. What do we expect to see happen to the supply curve? Government is providing you money for it, so the supply curve should move to the right. There will be an increase in supply. If the government introduces a tax on computer games, oh no, what happens then? What do we expect to see? Yes, an increase in production cost, which should cause the supply curve to shift left. Then you've got this one, which talks about technological advances in the production of computer games. What should we expect to see happen? Just to the right, just like that. See? Rock stars. Well done. And, you know, if you were drawing it and explaining, I would have given you 4 marks each for those. And there's 1, 2, 3 of them. So that's like 12 whole marks. That's a lot. Yeah. And that might look quite familiar. Is the supply one I posted, is that one? Yeah. There you go. Big help for that one. I think that's due tomorrow. Tomorrow. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Now we are going to take a slight detour, and we are going to discuss a little bit more detail about what happens when we bring the 2 halves together. All right, which is quite exciting. So, what we're going to do is we're going to leave this one. Turn that off for the time being. All right, now, turn that off for the time being. All right, so let's imagine, because now we're going to be looking at the actual market itself. So what product are we going to sell? We're going to look at the market for fingers, sorry, masks. Yes? Okay. That's quite a good market. I do wonder why there isn't like a mask with a Nexus logo on it or a Taylor's logo on it. I really do. That would have been quite a clever thing to have done. I tend to get bombarded quite a bit on Facebook with adverts because I like them sometimes. That's quite cool. And there are a lot of face masky ones, right? Maths teacher ones. So I tried to find economics teacher ones. No. A lot of maths teacher ones, science teacher ones, English teacher ones, principal ones, assistant principal ones, but no economics teacher ones, which is a bit sad. I'll have to create one. All right. So we need to draw our axes. All right, then we need to work out that there's going to be a price. So we need the price on the left-hand axis. The right-hand axis, what do we call that one? Quantity. Now, here's a test for you. If I'm going to illustrate the demand curve, that easier to see or harder to see? Easier? Easier. If I'm going to illustrate a demand curve, can I just turn all the lights out? Some of them not working. I thought it was only the ones at the front. Maybe some of them aren't working. What's that one? That one. Turn them all off. But then you will have reached that amazing state of being in the dark. You can see better if you're in the dark. Okay, you are apparently that modern technological age that can see in the dark. Right, okay. Now, if I was to illustrate the demand for masks, which way does the curve slope? Demand.
Downward sloping.
Downward sloping. Well done. I need to give it a name. Not going to call it Fred. We're going to call it demand. So I'm just going to use D for demand because it's demand. What about the supply curve? Which way did that slope? The other way. Upward sloping. So there's 0. So we need to go upwards from 0. And I'm going to label that one and I'm going to call it supply. For supply. Now, what do you notice about it? There's an intersection between the two. They meet here in the middle. It's like they're shaking hands. So, what we can do is we can say, right, there's a meeting point between supply and demand. Producers and consumers meeting there. If I do this, I'm going to drop a line down to here. I can also do one across here, all the way dotted lines. They're fun. All right. What have I illustrated? What do you think this is going to be in this? Oh, that's a toughie. Well, that's quantity, yeah? Right. So I'm going to label it with Q, but I'm going to give it another sub-label, QE. Oh, tricky. Then over here, this is the price axis, so that's going to be a price, but I'm going to give it a sub-label, all right, like the sport that you all, like the subject you all really enjoy, PE. The PE.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So, why E, do you think? So, any word that you think of that you can come up with in your head that might match that. What do you think? Oh, we're really close. We're going to use the word exciting. You ready for it? The word's going to be here. It's going to be EQUILIBRIUM.
That's what Alicia said.
Okay. Equilibrium. Because there's lots of libriums. Equilibrium. 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 Now, if you were to ask Dr. Google what the word equilibrium meant, what does he say? Go on. What does Dr. Google say the word equilibrium means? You're allowed to use Dr. Google now.
A state or rest or balance due to the action of
Dr. Google talks awful fancy.
Isn't it really the norm?
The normal,
Something like that, I think in science.
yeah. Okay. There was a word in there that began with the letter B, which I quite liked. What was the word?
balance. State or balance.
What's balance, do you think?
All sides are equal.
Something's equal. What's equal?
Supply and demand.
Yeah, well done, good sir. Supply equals demand. Yeah? But even more than that, because that is a quantity. So therefore you can say that the quantity supplied equals the quantity demanded. Wow, mind blowing. And there you were wondering, how is it that the, what are they called? Caesars, is that what they're called? The people who make your lunch. I think they're called Caesars. Yeah? You just call them, hey you, give me food. I don't know. All right? Caesars. Yeah? Which I've never liked as a word because it always sounds like somebody's trying to abduct somebody else. Yeah? Caesar! No, leave her alone. There was a play on the word Caesar and the phrase seize her. But anyway. So we've got a situation here where QS equals QD. We've got a situation here where supply equals demand. I'm going to say it's a state of balance. And I know you're looking at me going, Mr. David's never particularly balanced. So always unbalanced. Now, but what if it wasn't? So let's imagine what would happen. So here, let's imagine, because this is a price, right? So that price is the price at equilibrium. So then that's the price that Caesars are going to charge you for your lunch. Okay. But what if they decided to charge this price? Ooh, there's an imbalance in the force. Ooh. It's 12:30. Noisy class. If we said P1 was the price, Caesar says 10 ringgit a meal. Well, I don't know about you, but I think 10 ringgit might be a bit much. So maybe quantity demanded decreases because the price gone up. Law of demand. Price rises, quantity demanded falls. But price has risen, so Caesars reckons they could sell that many. Oh dear. Which letter pairing is bigger than the other letter pairing? Is QS bigger than QD or is QD bigger than QS? Mathematicians in the room. All right, how do you work it out? Well, that's 0. So which number is bigger, QD or QS? Say again. QS, well done, good sir. Yeah, so if we were to bracket these off, we'd actually say that QS is bigger than QD. Oh no! Tragedy for Caesars, because QS is what they're supplying. QD is us demanding. So there's more quantities being supplied than there is being demanded. So what have they got left over? No. More supply. They've got a whole lot of food left over. There's a word, I don't know, you should know this one, I'm sure. There's a word that you use when there's more available than people want. It does begin with the letter S. It's what you might say to your maths teacher when he's asking you about an arithmetic equation. That was a bit obscure. Yeah? No? All right. What about now? What about now? Yes, well done. A surplus. A surplus, where there's an excess of quantity supplied over quantity demanded. There's a surplus. Oh no, look, all the boxes of food piling up for Caesars. Oh no, what are we going to do? That's all right, we'll just give them to the borders. Isn't that what happens? No? Am I a border? What? Okay. You end up with a surplus. Now, here's a funny thing though. Anybody, do you know what a bath is? I know you're all shower people, well, probably, but anybody know what a bath is? You sit in it, you have water, soap. You have a bath sometimes? Bath bombs, that's quite exciting, but a bit of an unfortunate name. Yeah? Okay. Yes. All right. Where am I going to go? Right, so what we can do is we can imagine, and I know this is going to be a bit weird for you, I apologize, but imagine that this is a bath. And Lancelot has decided to take a bath. So he's turned the taps on. Here's a tap. That's what a tap looks like to me. So in America, faucet. You turn the taps on, yeah? All right with that? Where does the water go? Down. Turn the taps on, the water goes down. Where does the water go in the bath when you turn the taps on? It goes down, but where does it go specifically? Down the drain. Yeah. Always. It doesn't float there in space. It goes down the drain. Yeah? So if we were to leave Caesars alone, eventually they will figure this out, that the surplus doesn't work. Piles of food sitting there not being sold, not a good look. So eventually what they'd start doing is they'd start decreasing the quantities that they supplied, and they would start decreasing the price that they were offering for it. As they did that, what would happen? By the law of demand, quantity demanded would start rising. And where do you end up? There. Down the drain. That's where the water goes. You see that? All right. Now, I reckon you guys are so smart that we could do this in reverse. So let's do that. Let's do it in reverse. All right. So let's draw them back in. Let's imagine this time that Caesars makes an even bigger mistake, and instead of charging a price up here, they say, oh, what we should do is we should charge everyone 5 ringgit for the food. Deal. So what happens? Well, go along here. Now at 5 ringgit, they might be only able to supply that many, because that's how much it costs them to make it. So that's how much they can supply. Yeah. But if we follow the line along, that's your demand curve. Drop that down. There's the quantity demanded there. Right? Because we see a cheaper price and we go, yeah, let's buy more. Woo! I'll have 2 lunches instead of just 1. Yeah. Now we've got the reverse situation happening. Look at that one. Which number's bigger than which other one?
One is black.
Which of these 2 is bigger than the other one? Brandon. Is QD bigger than QS or QS bigger than QD? Here, the reverse situation has occurred. QD is bigger than QS. Right, the alligator eats the bigger number. That's what my son learned. Yeah. Right. So there's more quantities being demanded than there are supplied. Now there's another word beginning with S that we can attach to that situation. And again, it might be a word that you're familiar with. So let's see if we can write it up. Begins with S. As soon as I put the next letter, I think somebody's going to call it out. That's the letter H, in case you were confused by my messy handwriting. That might be what the producers say. Somebody said it. Yes, well done. Or, in other words, a very short time period, short age. So what's happened is there is now an excess of quantity demanded over quantity supplied. Trying to work out if you're asleep or not. No? Just resting your eyes. All right? So there's a shortage going on. Now, again, there's Caesars. There's now more people wanting their food than they've got food available. Now, that's a situation that can't stay the way it is. So let's go back to the bath analogy. This time, it's a bath in Australia. It's on the other side of the world. When you turn the water on in Australia, where does the water go? Up, apparently. Yeah, goes down the drain again. That way. Yeah? You see that? So, consumers will start saying, well, there's not enough of this product. So, tell you what, I'm prepared to offer you a bit more money. All right? Oh, okay. Well, we can produce a bit more. Well, if the price is going up, then we don't want as many. Well, we can produce a bit more. And eventually, down the drain again. So where does the market end up? Equilibrium. All right, so the entire theory of economics, and yes, there's lots of assumptions, lots of them. This is amazing. Now, the guy who wrote about this, obviously, he wrote about it in 1776, a wee while ago. And he was using pseudo-religious language. And he was talking about how the market was moving as if guided by an invisible hand. But nobody told it to do that. It just did. Like that. It's become known as a self-correcting mechanism. Did you ever have those toys as a kid and they had a weight at the bottom of them? And you put them on like a table and then you try to knock them over and they bounce back up? Those toys? Yeah, I don't know if they still exist. But those toys? They have a self-correcting mechanism in them. The heavy weight at the bottom. Well, that's what the market model does. Adam Smith said that if you leave the market alone, it will always return to an equilibrium. Always. Because the equilibrium is where it is a state of balance. Amazing. Just think of that. Leave Caesars to do their thing, and it will always return to an equilibrium. Always. The market is crazy like that. When you think about it, nobody's telling it to do that, it just does. So remember we talked about the difference between a planned economy and a market economy? There's the market economy. Now, I'm not saying that you're going to like the price of the meals that Caesars provides at all, but the market decides. Where does the price come from? It comes from where supply equals demand. What happens at that equilibrium? Quantity supplied equals quantity demanded. Something else happens, which is a little bit more, I was going to say ethereal, but then I might lose you with that one. Does anybody know the word ether? Heard the word ether before? Computing people might have, because there's such a thing called an Ethernet cable. Yeah? In the very old days, when people didn't understand a whole lot of things, okay, like things that you take for granted now, like air. Sorry, how do you say it? The stuff that you breathe. Well, I have this debate with my wife. Because I'm a Kiwi, the A-I-R, I pronounce wrong, apparently. How do you pronounce it? A-I-R. Air. Air. Right? Because I pronounce it this here, and it's apparently hair. 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 I don't know. Yeah? Very British speaking people. All right? Oh, do you want to know the three British ones? Yeah? Check this out. These are the ones. This is the ones that I was going for. Here, here, there. If you want to sound like a real fancy British person, those are the three words you say. Here, here, and there. And then you just say them quickly. And then you stick out your hand. Here. All right. Because my son doesn't always understand when I say some things because of my accent. So my wife will have to interpret what it is I'm saying, which I always find quite amusing. Because I always thought I spoke right. But apparently not. Yeah? The market will return to an equilibrium all by itself. Cain doesn't tell it to do it. It just goes there. All by itself. Turn the water on, there it goes. Yeah? But what would happen if, because we didn't like the price that Caesars charged, what would happen if, how am I going for time? All right. What would happen if we put a plank of wood across the bath? Yeah. No, let's do it this colour. What would happen then? If we were to turn the taps on here, here, get rid of this one. What will happen? We put a plank of wood across the bath and turn the taps on. Works the same with sinks, by the way. Put a plank of wood across the sink, turn the taps on, what happens? Yeah. Right, the water starts coming down and down and down. Ah, it can't go anywhere. Can't go down there, so it's going to spill out. Water comes down and down and down. Ah. Yeah. So sometimes the government doesn't like, and the people don't like the prices that the market sets. And so they're going to try to stop the price, which, as we're going to see, is the equivalent to putting a plank of wood across a bath or a sink. You end up with a whole lot of water all over the floor. That's what's going to happen. It's quite crazy. It's also one of the weird connections that economics has with Star Wars. Star Wars people, do we know Star Wars? Yeah. Because what we do is we talk about the forces of supply and the forces of demand. So at an equilibrium, the forces are in balance. All right? And when we interfere in the market process, there is an imbalance in the force. Yeah? Pop culture reference? No. All right. So what do you think happens if you were to put a plank of wood here? Where would the water go? Up. My word, you and gravity have got problems, haven't they? Water goes up. You put a plank across this, yeah? My son loves doing this sort of stuff. He's sticking his finger in the tap to see what happens. Where does the water go? All across the bath. That's where it goes, yeah? So the water won't go there, because that's where it wants to go. So it's going to go down here. The water won't go down there. That's where it wants to go. It's going to spill out and go down here. Now, this is the same situation that we had before with one slight difference. The quantity supplied greater than quantity demanded, so you've got a surplus again. The difference being is the plank of wood. The difference being is that as long as that plank of wood is there, the market will never return back there. It won't, it can't. The wood's in the way. Yeah? So what we're saying here is that if we try to fix the prices in a market, we're going to end up causing a mess, potentially a surplus. We might, if we were in Australia, decide, no, tell you what we're going to do. We're going to put the plank of wood down here. What happens then when we turn the taps on? Here, here. All right? Doesn't go down the drain, that's where it wants to go. Can't go that way because the plank of wood's there. So instead, it spills out. This time it's quantity supplied there, quantity demanded there. So here, again, shortage. But it's a different kind of shortage because it can't be fixed. Because there's a big plank of wood in the way. So what Adam Smith actually said was, when the government tries to fix the market, it will fail spectacularly. That the best thing that we can possibly do is to leave the market alone. We're not necessarily going to like the price that comes out of it, but that's not the market's fault. The market acts as if controlled by an invisible hand. Yeah? The forces of supply and demand will cause that to happen. That's what we say. All right. Is that okay? Yeah? Fantastic. Now that's where we're going. Abu, you wanted it to be a bit more complicated and a bit more involved. Oh, I tell you, we ain't got the half of it yet. All right, that's the start. With each new level, with each new step up the rung of the ladder, it's going to get more complicated. It will. All right, this particular topic in particular. There is also, in a couple of weeks' time, obviously past, half term, all right, there will be a period of time where we're going to do a tiny bit of maths. Yeah. Now, maths isn't everybody's friend, and I understand that. Wasn't my particular friend at school either, right? But the maths that you will end up doing aren't as complicated as they might first appear. So a little bit of what we will have to do will be to not panic. Okay? See diagrams like that? Don't panic. Okay? You are going to get lots of practice at them. However, I am going to ask you to draw them in the future. And I'm going to ask you to explain them in the future. Yes, absolutely I am. All right? So there we come to a situation where we need to make sure that you are revising the material regularly, looking through the glossary, making sure you understand it. And if you're having questions, finding out the answers, you can always ask Dr. Google, or you can send me a quick email and say, hey, Mr. David, what does this mean? Now, while you're there, you might like to nominate someone to do the cleaning of the desks, the pink stuff for the desks, the blue stuff for your hands. You can pack yourselves away. It is lunchtime very soon. Thank you.
I don't care what you did.